Hey Reddit, my name's Ethan. I'm 29 years old, and I've had a pretty decent relationship with my parents over the years. But if I'm being honest, it's been a bit strained lately. For context, I'm the oldest in the family, followed by my sister Jessica, who's 26, and then my brother Jake, who's 24. Now, here's the thing about my brother. He's lazy. There's no other way to put it. I mean, sure, everyone has their ups and downs, but Jake has been a bit of a lost cause when it comes to motivation. Ever since he graduated college, he's bounced from job to job, always quitting after a few months. He's always had some excuse ready, too much stress, bad management, you name it. In the meantime, he's been living at home with our parents, not really contributing to anything. I get that everyone goes through rough patches, but it's been going on for years. He's entitled, and to be honest, it's starting to get really frustrating for me. So, fast forward to last month. I'm doing okay financially, and I thought, you know what? I want to do something nice for my parents. They've worked hard their entire lives, and they deserve a proper vacation. So I booked this amazing week-long trip to Paris for the three of us, all-inclusive, first-class tickets, 5-star hotel, the works. I really wanted to spoil them. I figured we'd have a great time together, catch up, and just make some memories. They've been talking about going to Europe for years, but never really had the time or money for it. Now, my sister Jessica was supposed to join us too, but she had some things going on with her job and couldn't take the time off, so it was just going to be me and my parents. I was excited. I put a lot of thought into this. I booked everything. Flights, the hotel, even private tours for us once we landed. I was on top of it. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. My parents were a little surprised at first, but when I told them about the trip, they were over the moon. My mom even cried a bit, which I didn't expect. I felt like I was finally doing something right. But then, about a week before we were supposed to leave, I got a call from my mom. She sounded off, a little hesitant, but nothing too strange at first. "Hey, Ethan, we need to talk about something," she said. "Sure, what's up?" I asked, thinking maybe she was nervous about the flight or something. "Well, your father and I were talking, and we've decided that we're going to take Jake with us instead of you." I didn't quite process it at first. "Wait, what?" I said, hoping I'd heard her wrong. "We just think he needs a break more than you do, honey. He's been struggling with his job, and we think this trip would do him good," she continued, her voice way too cheerful for my liking. My stomach sank. There it was, the classic excuse. Jake struggling with his job again. He wasn't struggling. He just didn't want to work. He was lazy, and they were enabling him. "Wait, hold on. You're telling me you're taking Jake instead of me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Well, yeah. We just thought it would be better. You've got a stable job, and you don't really need a vacation. Plus, Jake's really been going through a rough time lately." I let out a quiet sigh. I could feel the frustration building inside of me. I'd spent so much time planning this trip for all of us, and now they were just giving it to Jake? But I already paid for everything. The tickets, the hotel, the tours. "I've already arranged all of this," I said, keeping my tone as level as possible, but I could feel the anger starting to bubble up. "I know, sweetie, but we think Jake really needs this. You understand, right?" My mom's voice was soft but firm, and I could tell she wasn't going to budge. I didn't say anything for a moment. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her how unfair it was, how I'd worked so hard to set this up for them, how Jake didn't appreciate anything, but I didn't. Instead, I just said, "All right, fine. I understand." I heard her sigh in relief. "Thank you, Ethan. I knew you'd understand. We'll take good care of him, I promise." I couldn't bring myself to respond. What was there to say? I hung up the phone and just stared at the wall for a while, trying to calm myself down. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just an innocent mistake. This was classic favoritism. My parents always gave Jake special treatment, and at some point, I'd stopped even trying to get their attention. But this was too much. I went through the motions of packing and getting ready for the trip, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I'd been working hard for months to give them this perfect vacation, and they were giving it all to Jake. It didn't make sense. When the day finally came to pick them up for the flight, I drove to their house in the morning, trying to push the anger aside. Maybe it was better that I didn't go, I told myself. Maybe I could just use this time to relax, to focus on myself. But deep down, I knew I wasn't going to let it slide. I showed up at their place, and they were standing outside with Jake, who was acting like he was about to board a private jet. My dad handed me an envelope, and as I took it, I saw the ticket inside, Jake's name on it. There you go, buddy, my dad said, smiling. We figured you'd want to give it to Jake. He's really been down lately. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, my mind racing. Thanks, I said flatly, turning to walk back to my car. They didn't seem to notice how hurt I was. Or maybe they just didn't care. I drove back home, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I thought about everything. About how I'd been overshadowed my whole life by my brother, about how they always played favorites, about how I'd been the one left behind. I could feel the anger boiling up inside me, but I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. No, I had something else planned. As soon as I got back home, I pulled out my laptop. I'd already booked everything for this trip: hotels, private tours, restaurant reservations. It was all set. And now, I was going to cancel it all. I smiled to myself as I picked up the phone and started dialing the hotel in Paris. They wouldn't know until they landed. They wouldn't know what hit them. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen as the phone rang. The hotel in Paris answered on the second ring, and I gave them my booking reference number. Bonjour, how may I assist you? The receptionist said, with that unmistakable French accent. It almost felt like I was in the room with them. Hi, I began, keeping my voice steady. I'd like to cancel my reservation. It's for a suite under the name Ethan Miller. There was a slight pause as the receptionist typed into their system. I see the booking here, sir. A very nice suite, I must say. Would you like to reschedule or request a refund? I didn't hesitate. No, I'd like to cancel it completely. I don't want any future bookings or arrangements related to this reservation. The receptionist seemed a bit surprised but went on with the process, confirming the cancellation details and assuring me that everything would be handled. As she spoke, I started to feel a sense of calm wash over me. It was done. The reservation that I had spent so much time making. All of it was being wiped away in one simple phone call. I hung up, and a strange sense of satisfaction crept over me. I was still angry, but there was something cathartic about taking control of the situation. I wasn't going to let my parents and brother just waltz into that hotel, acting like nothing had happened. They needed to feel the consequences of their actions. Next up, I called the private tour company that I had arranged for us. It was one of the main things I was excited about for the trip, a personalized day tour of the Louvre, with a guide who would take us through all the major exhibits and explain everything in detail. I knew my parents would have loved it, especially my mom, who had always talked about her dream of seeing the Mona Lisa in person. But it didn't matter now. I couldn't just let this go. Bonjour, monsieur. How may I assist you today? Another French voice, slightly more formal this time. I need to cancel the tour scheduled for the Miller family, I said, not even giving them a chance to explain the details. It's no longer needed. Please cancel it. The tour operator hesitated for a moment, as if trying to process my request. Monsieur, if you're sure. I'm sure, I said firmly. She went on to confirm the cancellation, explaining that there would be a slight fee. But I wasn't even listening at that point. I didn't care about the fee. What mattered was that this vacation was no longer going to be the dream trip I had worked so hard to create for them. Once that call was over, I moved on to the restaurant reservations. A few fine dining spots in Paris, ones that I had researched and booked in advance, all taken care of. I'd even reserved a table at a Michelin-starred restaurant that my dad had always wanted to try. It was perfect. Or it had been. I thought about what my parents and brother were doing now. They were probably packing, getting excited for their trip, thinking it was all going according to plan. But what they didn't know was that I was preparing for them to land and face the fallout. I looked at the clock. My parents and Jake would be boarding the plane soon. I had a few more things to take care of, and that's when I realized that the hotel's cancellation wasn't enough. No, I needed to do more. I needed to make sure they would feel the full weight of what they had done. I grabbed my phone and quickly started to draft a message. It wasn't just going to be about canceling the trip. It was going to be a message about the way they treated me. It was time for them to realize that their actions had consequences. They couldn't just take from me without a second thought and expect there to be no repercussions. The message was simple, but it would hit hard. I hope you all enjoy your trip. I've gone ahead and canceled everything I arranged for you in Paris, the hotel, the tours, the restaurants. Since you thought Jake needed this more than I did, he can figure it all out once you land. Have fun. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the send button. I thought about it. Should I soften it? Should I make it less harsh? But then I thought about all the years of favoritism, all the ways I had been pushed aside in favor of Jake. He had gotten everything handed to him on a silver platter, and I had worked my ass off to make this trip a reality. No, this was the only way they would learn. I hit send. The message was sent. I sat there for a minute, my heart pounding in my chest. The satisfaction was real, but there was also this gnawing feeling of uncertainty. Would they even realize what I had done? Would they understand why I did it? Or would they just blame me for ruining their trip? I told myself it didn't matter. They needed to learn, and I was going to make sure they did. The next few hours felt like an eternity. I kept checking my phone, waiting for a response. Part of me expected an immediate call or text from my mom, or maybe even from Jake. But nothing came. It was as if they had no idea what was coming. By the time the evening rolled around, I was pacing around my apartment, unable to sit still. I had sent the message, but now I was worried. What if they didn't react the way I expected? What if they just brushed it off, like they always did with everything else? It was crazy how much I still cared about their approval, even after everything they'd done. I shook my head and took a deep breath. I had done what I needed to do. Now, all I could do was wait. And that's when the first message came through. It wasn't from my parents. It was from Jake. "Ethan, what did you do?" he wrote. "Why did you cancel everything? Mom and Dad are mad. They say you're being petty. What is wrong with you?" I smiled to myself. This was just the beginning. I stared at Jake's message for a moment, letting it sink in. His words were like a punch to the gut, but in the back of my mind, I knew this was exactly the reaction I had been waiting for. He didn't get it. Of course, he didn't. He was so used to everything being handed to him that the idea of consequences was foreign. I could almost hear the anger in his words, but I wasn't about to back down. I had done what I needed to do. I wasn't some ATM that could just withdraw from whenever they wanted. I took a deep breath and started typing my response, determined to stay calm despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. "Jake, you don't get it, do you? This isn't about being petty. This is about the way you and Mom and Dad have always treated me. You can't just take everything I give you and expect there to be no consequences. If you don't like it, you can figure it out yourself. I'm done." I hit send and set the phone down on the coffee table. For the first time in a long while, I felt a strange sense of power. It was like I had finally taken control of a situation that had spiraled out of my hands for years. But what happened next took me by surprise. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was a text from my mom. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected her to react so quickly, but I guess she had realized the gravity of the situation. "Ethan, what are you doing? Why would you cancel everything? We didn't want to upset you, but Jake really needed this trip. You know how hard things have been for him. Please, you're being unreasonable." Her words stung, but I kept my composure. It was always the same with her, wasn't it? Always putting Jake first, always making excuses for him, even when he didn't deserve it. She was still trying to make me feel guilty. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and thought about it. I had to let her stew in the consequences. It was the only way they would learn. I wasn't going to rescue them this time. The clock ticked on. I waited, and then came the call. My phone rang, and the name on the screen sent a chill down my spine. It was my dad. I let it ring for a few moments before answering. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it wasn't going to be pretty. "Ethan," he said, his voice stern but tinged with frustration. "What did you do? Why would you cancel everything we planned for Paris? You've made a mess of this trip. I want an explanation." I could hear the tension in his voice, and I braced myself for what was coming. But I didn't back down. I wasn't going to let him guilt trip me into backing out of this. "I did it because I'm tired of being taken advantage of," I said calmly. "You guys have always put Jake first. You've always treated him like the golden child. And I've been left behind, over and over again. I thought I could give you something nice for once, but apparently, you didn't need it." Jake did. There was silence on the other end of the line, a long stretch of it. I could feel the weight of my words sinking in. Maybe they hadn't expected me to stand up for myself like this. Maybe they were just so used to me being the quiet one, the one who always went along with whatever they wanted. "Well, this is just great," my dad said finally, his voice a little softer now. "We don't even know what we're going to do now. You've messed everything up. Do you even realize that?" "I realize perfectly," I replied, not backing down. "You've been taking everything I do for granted for so long, and I'm not going to let it happen anymore." There was a long pause, and then I heard him sigh heavily. "Fine. You want to play it like that? We'll figure it out ourselves. But don't think we're going to forget this." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The rest of the night passed by slowly. I knew my parents and Jake were probably scrambling to figure out what to do next. They'd never been in a situation like this before. They had always assumed I would be the one to save them, the one to smooth things over when the storm came. But not this time. The next morning, I woke up to a slew of missed texts and a voicemail from my dad. The message was short and to the point. Ethan, we're booking the first available flight back. I hope you're happy. It wasn't until later that day that I saw a final message from Jake. We're getting the next flight back. It's not fair, Ethan. You ruined everything. It was almost too easy. By the time my parents and Jake returned, they were forced to pay for their own tickets back home. I couldn't help but laugh as I thought about how they had to scrounge for the money themselves, all while dealing with the mess I'd left behind. They didn't have a clue what to do. There were no luxurious hotels waiting for them. There were no guided tours or gourmet meals. All they had was the cold reality of having to book their own flights back and figure out how to get home on their own dime. I didn't tell them I'd planned everything ahead of time. I didn't tell them that I had already contacted the airline to make sure they couldn't use their original tickets. I didn't even tell them about the hours I had spent canceling all their plans. It wasn't about being petty anymore. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about showing them that I was done playing the part of the doormat. They'd taken everything from me, without so much as a second thought. Now, it was time for them to learn what it felt like to be the one left out in the cold. It was a full day before my parents and Jake finally returned home. They didn't call me, didn't try to talk to me. It was almost like they were too embarrassed to face me after everything that had happened. Part of me was expecting them to show up at my door, begging for forgiveness, pleading with me to fix everything. But nothing came. Instead, they just let the silence stretch on. I wasn't sure what to expect when I saw them. In a way, I had already braced myself for their anger, their hurt, maybe even some guilt tripping. I'd dealt with it before, after all. But there was something different this time. When they walked through the door, they all seemed defeated. My mom, her face pale, was the first to speak. Ethan, she said quietly, her voice small. I don't understand why you had to go this far. We were just trying to do something nice for Jake. I looked at her, trying to stay calm. Nice? For Jake? You mean, taking my ticket and not even telling me? That kind of nice. She flinched, and I could see the regret starting to take shape in her eyes. Jake, standing behind her, didn't say a word. He just avoided my gaze, as if he knew there was no excuse for what he had done. Dad, always the one to try to take control of situations, finally spoke up. We messed up, Ethan. We should have communicated better. But you can't just cancel everything like that. You should have talked to us. Talked to you, I said, a slight edge creeping into my voice. I've been talking to you for years. I've been giving, and giving. And what do I get in return? You taking my ticket without a word, without even thinking twice. Do you really think I deserve that? My mom opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. You think I owe you? You think I owe Jake? Well, I don't. I've been the one left out for years, and I'm done with it. Done with always being the one who has to take the back seat while Jake gets everything handed to him. Done with always being the one who cleans up the messes you create. The silence that followed felt suffocating, but I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. I had done what I needed to do. Maybe they didn't understand it now, but someday they would. Jake finally spoke up. You didn't have to do all this, Ethan. You really didn't. We could have worked it out, but you just threw it all away. I stared at him. I didn't throw anything away. You threw it away. You all did. And that was the last thing I said to them that day. I didn't feel the need to say anything else. The damage had been done, and I didn't want to get drawn into more empty words and apologies that wouldn't change anything. As the days passed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. It was a strange feeling, almost like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Sure, there was still tension in the air, and my parents still tried to apologize in their own way, but the fact that they'd been forced to deal with the consequences of their actions felt right. They'd learned a lesson, and it had been a long time coming. But here's where I'm stuck. Was I really right to do all this? Was it justified? I can't help but wonder if I went too far. I mean, yeah, they were wrong to take my ticket without even asking. And yeah, Jake has been the golden child for as long as I can remember. But maybe I could have handled it differently. Maybe there was a better way to deal with all of this without going so hard. But then again, I've been the one who's always had to take a back seat. I've always been the one who had to put up with their nonsense. Maybe it was time for me to stand up for myself and make them realize that their actions have consequences. So, Reddit, here I am, asking you, was I right to do this? Should I have done something different? Or was this the only way they were ever going to get the message? I'll be honest, Part of me is still unsure. But I know one thing for sure. I'll never let them walk all over me again.